exploring stories, Canadian savagery and ruthlessness in World War I. Canada, having only been founded 50 years prior to 1914, was still a young and newly flourishing country. It by no means had a ton of money and barely had a functioning military. When the British Empire declared war, Canada was automatically dragged in as it was a dominion. The Allied powers boasting 42 million troops, and of that 42 million, Canada provided 650,000 soldiers. Canada's first major involvement in World War I was on the Second Battle of Ypres, when the Germans initially used their brand new weapon, chlorine gas. While everybody turned and ran, the Canadians dug in and fought. It is estimated in this battle 1/3 of all Canadian troops sent in died or were sufficiently wounded to remove them from the war entirely. Canada, having such a small army compared to the rest of the militaries, so 650,000 versus armies of 10 million, there was a sense of camaraderie between the soldiers, and there was this extra level of wanting to dig deep and give everything for your fellow soldiers and wanting to get revenge for them. At this point, when the Canadians were in the war, fighting significant battles, they were known for not taking any prisoners of war. Wounded Germans or Central Power individuals who throw down their weapons seeking to surrender would be gunned down. There's even one of the more famous known situations in which Canadians began opening fire on Germans who were seeking to do a Christmas Day truce. Every other power had that Christmas Day truce where British came out of their trenches and the Germans traded trinkets as well as cigarettes, and they even played soccer. But the Canadians did not give a damn. We immediately opened fire on them, killing 2. In another situation in which the Canadians do a little bit of trolling, they would throw food cans over to the Germans, and the Germans, having been starving since they began running out of resources towards the end of the war, would greedily and excitedly grab those cans of food and call over their fellow soldiers. When the Canadians were convinced that there was enough soldiers gathered around where the cans of food were landing, they'd start throwing grenades to get as many of them as they could. Definitely doing a little bit of trolling and a little bit of war criming here. And to add on to that a little bit, another way that they would min-max killing Germans is they would actually empty the cans themselves of food, so they'd eat down the food, then they'd stuff a little bomb into it and then throw it over. And the Germans, seeing a can of food coming over, they couldn't pass it up and they'd run to it and it would blow up in their face. So a little bit of trolling. Another fun fact for you is Canadians were godly at clearing trenches in nighttime raids. It was one of the things that the Germans feared us for the most and made them have a hard time falling to sleep at night. Now, it's to be reminded as well that when the war broke off, Canada didn't really have a military. It had a bunch of civilians that were proud and brave and willing to go to war. So this is where this next excerpt comes out. I'm going to read you verbatim what it says. This comes from the Canadian War Museum. There were screams of German soldiers, terror shaken by the flash of light in their eyes, and black faces above them, bayonets already red with blood. It was butcher's work, quick and skillful. 30 Germans were killed before the Canadians even went back. And at this same Canadian War Museum, you can actually see a bunch of homemade weapons that the Canadians had brought or made during the war, which includes meat cleaver, push daggers, and spiked clubs. Now, you also have to remember, lighting systems weren't readily available in 1914, so imagine just some random Canadian farmer wearing military fatigues, all black face, wearing war paint, dives into your trench. You can't see him anymore, he's gone. The next thing you know, the gunner beside you has a massive gaping hole in their neck because a meat cleaver came through it. As you turn around because you hear the rustling noise and you try and see where it is, a massive bat filled with nails comes down on your head. The Canadians were savage. They didn't need special equipment. They just needed to get in there. You they were also crafting homemade pipe bombs and grenade catapults to increase their killing power. This is 1914 too, so you can't just Google how to make a pipe bomb. So let's go Canadians. Canadians were so good at trench raiding, they were actually able to head up 1 kilometer in total behind the enemy lines, surprising so many Germans who never even expected to have a soldier or to see an enemy soldier this far out. And before Vimy Ridge was done, the nights before, there were trench raids of about 900 men on a nightly basis. Right when the soldiers would begin digging in because they knew that they were being attacked during a night raid by the Canadians, we were gone. Nowhere to be found, already 1 kilometer back behind our safety and going to sleep for the night. Next, we're going to move into prisoners of war. I'm going to give you a quick little context of who I'm quoting. There's this guy called Tim Cook. He's a historian at the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, and he wrote a book where he essentially takes first-hand accounts from individuals who served in the Great War in World War II in order to preserve them. It says here, a typical account would involve a Canadian unit losing men while charging an enemy position, and then executing the soldiers in that position when they tried to surrender. Here's a quote in his book from Lieutenant R.C. Germain, a Canadian soldier. After losing half of my company there, we rushed them, and they had the nerve to throw up their hands and cry, "Comrade, comrade!" All the comrade they got was a foot of cold steel through them. Lieutenant Germain, you are a savage. And if it wasn't just straight up executing prisoners of war when they were surrendering at that moment, Canadians were also executing them while they already had the prisoner of war in custody. In one case, a Canadian slipped a live grenade into the greatcoat pockets of a German prisoner. In another, infantryman Richardson Rogers went on a killing spree at Vimy Ridge after seeing the death of one of his friends. It's quoted to say, "Once I killed my first German with my bayonet, my blood was riled. Every German I could not reach with my bayonet, I shot. I think no more of murdering them than I used to think of shooting rabbits." Alrighty, man. That's normal. In some other cases, Cook found evidence of Canadian commanders explicitly ordering their troops not to take prisoners. So, quoting James Owen, a 16-year-old private who was told by his commanding officer before a 1916 attack, "I don't want any prisoners." Another member of the same platoon was said that he was told by his commanding officer, "Remember, no prisoners, they'll just eat your rations." So, by the end of the war, the Canadian Army's reputation was an army of no mercy. And kind of off topic, but not really at the same time, I'm sure a lot of you know that the Germans would use gas a lot during the war, but the Canadians used gas like it was water. If we found something moving that was an enemy and we had the time to gas it, we would. Canadians were one of the worst for using gas. It was even said by General Currie, a general for the Canadian Army, that if we could have killed the whole German army by gas, we would have gladly done so. So, to summarize, Canadians have always been known as being some of the kindest people with open arms, willing to take in anybody and give them a chance. But if you make us cross the ocean, you better know that we're not here to mess around. Thank you so much for listening to my video. If you still are, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, or a like. Thank you again, and you have a great rest of your night.